Hello, everybody. It's Dave here from Roast to Freedom, and I just wanted to talk today a little bit about habits. So, we're all very much creatures of habit. Uh, Most of what we do is purely habitual, um, and this is quite a necessary part of our function. So, if we didn't have habits, we'd have to think about every single thing we had to do. So every time we jump in the car, we'd have to think, right, now I've got to find the keys, find the ignition, um, switch on the engine, etc. So our brain automates so much of what we do, and this is useful in the main. It's an essential thing. So we don't necessarily want to not have habits, but what we want to try to do is to recognise those habits that are problematic and those that are not. And for a lot of people, it's quite easy to recognise the habits that they'd like to change, but a lot harder, of course, to implement those changes. So, what kinds of things can we do to make sure that the habits we want to change do indeed change? So, I think the first thing we need to understand is that it's not really primarily about willpower. Willpower can only get you so far, and you will need a certain amount of resolution. But willpower in itself will run out at some point if if your environment is cluttered by all the cues that trigger these bad habits. So the most important thing you can do probably is to actually change the environment around you so that you don't get those cues that trigger bad habits. So for example, if you're trying to give up drinking and you go to the pub every night surrounded by your mates who are all drinking, then your chances of being able to use your willpower to resist the temptation to drink is it's going to run out at some point. And it may well be that just passing a pub is sufficient to trigger the desire to go in and have a drink. So really, you need to be able to change that environment. So if you know you're going out for a walk or whatever, you don't go past the pub because you know you'll be tempted to go in. Just by way of an example. So there's cues that trigger all these habitual actions, and it's so automated that we really have to avoid the triggers by changing the environment. So other ways that particularly relate to running, for example. So if you want to make sure you go running every day, it's a great idea to set up a habitual loop so that you you use those cues that trigger the habit in a good way. So you could set out all your running kit the night before, make sure it's all ready if you go first thing in the morning, so that there's little effort required in actually making the decision to run, because once you've done it once or twice, it will just become habitual. So that's one example of that. Another example is when you join a club or anything. So if you're surrounded by other people who have the same values as you, who enjoy running or whatever the club happens to be about, then you're far more likely to be compliant to changing your habits than if you surround yourself. In the case of running, for example, if you surround yourself with people who are avid non-runners and who scoff at you every time you mention the word running, you're far more. We're very much social creatures, and we're very much influenced by the people around us. So we tend to, however much we think of ourselves as an individual, it's with our own choices and decisions. These decisions are very often actually made for us by the people who are around us and the environment that we create around us. So if your cupboard is full of chocolate biscuits, and every time you go to the cupboard you see the chocolate biscuits, your willpower is going to run out. If there's no chocolate biscuits available without getting in your car or walking down to the shop, you're far less likely to succumb to the habit. So making the bad habits as inaccessible as possible, or as difficult to access as possible, is another really good trick. So you need to be able to arrange your environment so that the habits, the good habits that you want to create, become easily accessible. They're effortless to decide to perform the action, and to make the bad habits you're trying to get rid of as difficult to perform as possible, so that you can't just the cue doesn't automatically occur. So changing the cue, changing the environment, can very quickly change those habits. So we need to forget about the idea that good habits are all about being strong-willed and tough, and we do need to have some motivation and some resolution, but the environment is a far stronger influence in forming habits and our ability to change habits and get rid of bad habits, create good new habits. And given that, you know, most of what we do is about habit, then it's worth spending some time on those little details so that you don't keep falling into those habitual patterns that are dragging you down, and that you create positive patterns that are going to take you forward to where you want to go, wherever that happens to be. Okay, so it's just a little thought about habits, and I hope that's useful, because I deal with, I come into contact with a lot of people, particularly with weight management issues, who are stuck in habitual loops, who are not able to get out of that environment where everybody around them is eating bad food and not exercising. Particularly sort of ladies looking after husbands and families, and they all want to eat junk. That's very difficult, I admit. And also people who go out to eat a lot, well, to party a lot with people who like to do all the kind of wrong things from the point of view of their health and fitness. So create the best environment you can, arrange your environment to make it as easy to create good habits and get rid of bad habits as possible within the limits of your lifestyle, and you can make great progress very quickly. Okay, so that's Dave at Road to Freedom. Please subscribe to the channel, like my videos, etc., etc.